Hello and welcome to the Marathon Agent Podcast. I am your host, Antonio McNeil. For today's episode, we're starting episode 1, and the title is The Marathon. As you can tell, I am the Marathon Agent, and you're probably wondering, well, what's that about, right? We are going to talk about all of that as we start this new journey with this podcast, and you will get to know more about me. I'm sure you're going to love everything that you hear. You may not like some stuff. You may be, biased and say you don't know what you're talking about, but hey, it's all good. The main purpose of this podcast is to reach all Gen Z and millennial entrepreneurs, and hopefully more generations can follow. But the primary focus is Gen Z millennials who are entrepreneurs like me. I started at 19 years old, as you may have heard, as a real estate agent, and for the last 7 years, now 26 years old, I have a property in my hometown of San Diego, beautiful condo by downtown, a house here in Palm Springs that's now a vacation rental, Airbnb when I'm not living here. So there's a lot of information, insight, knowledge that I have to give to my generation, and it's the best time to start now. I put in a lot of my life savings to make this vacation rental happen, and the podcast idea has just been going and going and going. So now is the perfect time to give that free education and also talk about the market, the changes in the market, and that's what the podcast is going to be about. Real estate topics, the market itself in real estate. I'm also going to talk about finances, Airbnb, vacation rental investing, things that I'm doing currently. And also, I'm going to be light on the channel. I'm going to talk about things that are more personal, things that are going to maybe help you be inspired mentally. Mental health is something I will be talking about. I will also be talking about the culture. I'm very into hip hop. I dress fancy, but I love it. And I think the biggest thing for hip hop is that it's really shaped me as a person too. A lot of the hip hop I listen to has made me more inspired to be even a better entrepreneur than I am currently. Going back to the marathon, that's just what it is for me. It's been a marathon since I started real estate. And taking it before real estate, when I was young, my favorite rappers, I can name a couple, Tupac, Kanye West, Nipsey Hussle. There are certain artists in hip hop that I love, that stand out, that have helped me and kind of guided me on the right path to become an entrepreneur, a successful one that I am today. Of course, as you know, with Nipsey Hussle, he has the whole marathon. That was his whole situation from the get-go. 13 years old, I believe, and I was hooked from the beginning. And it's funny because growing up, I was always the problem child. I was the black sheep, literally. I grew up in a Mexican household, being half black by my father and half Mexican, my mother's side. They raised me. And, also growing up, not knowing my sexuality, there was a lot. And, liking hip hop, I gravitated towards music that inspired me to want better for myself. So that's kind of where, I don't know how it happened, but it happened. Nipsey became one of my biggest inspirations. And from the beginning, when I first listened to his music when I was 13 years old, I'm like, I'm gonna take it far. I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but I'm gonna take it far. So to fast forward, 6 years, from 13 years old to being 19 years old in 2015, I had already graduated high school. I got accepted to Portland State University, $50,000 tuition, and I felt like, yeah, that was cool. The scholarship was $50,000 for 1 year of tuition. And, to be honest, at the time, I knew that college was not going to be the thing for me. That's why I said, let me just hold off and graduate high school, get my diploma, and kind of take a year to figure things out. I decided to take a year off. I was finding myself figuring things out, knowing that I wanted better for myself, just knowing that college wasn't the way for me. And one thing that I had growing up, besides hip hop, music, and mentors to influence me, I had my grandparents. Believe it or not, my grandparents, they are my saviors when it comes to people in my family. They didn't have to raise me, but they did. They took me under their wing at a very young age, and I gained so much knowledge from them even today. They're the only people in my family that own properties. So when I was young, around the same time I'm listening to Nipsey Hussle, about investing and about, getting out of the hood and figuring things out for yourself, I'm seeing my grandparents go to Texas, Arizona, buying these properties, back in, 07, 08, 09 during the recession era. Okay, crazy. But they were making profit, and they were showing me after a couple of years of owning the homes, like they selling them in 2015, 2016, 2020, they're making a lot of profit off these houses. So when they sold their first rental properties back when I became a real estate agent, before I became a real estate agent, I was like, yeah, I gotta do this. I gotta get into this. And on top of that, my charismatic charm, my personality, it's high energy. I'm definitely rough around the edges. I still am to this day, you know, but I'm very successful and I have my own lane that I carved out. If I had listened to everybody in the beginning telling me I couldn't be a realtor or I couldn't be an agent, then, you know, I would not be here right now if I just believed that. You know, trust me, when I was 19, I was eager, still eager now, but I was really ready to take on any challenge. And that's where the marathon really comes from too, because even when I started at 19, I started from ground zero, like the bottom, meaning I had no resources, no support. I took the courses and, you know, after I did the courses, got my license, it took me about almost 7 months to complete. I was like nowhere getting, I had no help anywhere. Like nobody was there to help me once I was there. And I think a big part of that is because, you know, I was trying something completely new, especially being so young. There were people around me, the real estate agents who've been in the business for years, who are looking at me like, what are you doing? You think you're gonna make this work? And you know, from the beginning, I always had pushback. I had people who were sprinting, literally sprinting, you know, past me, getting these deals, you know, and the first year, I'll be honest with you, I made no money in real estate. I was 19 years old, 2015, making no money. And, you know, for a whole year from 19 to 20 years old, you know, I had to have part-time jobs, like 3 jobs, making $60,000 combined, thinking I'm never gonna make it out of real estate, you know, after 1 year of no money produced from real estate. And the marathon continues, right? Because had I gave up that first year, you know, I would not be here in my property, one of my properties, you know, making this podcast, trying to give you inspired, or anybody out there who's listening inspired. I did not give up on myself that first year, but I did a lot of mistakes my first year. Let's be real, you know, talking about year 1, and that marathon was insane. I thought that I could do it all on my own. You know, being a young Gen Z, you know, especially 19-year-old Gen Z guy at the time, you know, I was very prideful. I had graduated high school, and nobody thought I could even do that. And I was ready to take on the world by myself as a brand new agent at 19 years old. That was the worst decision ever because, like, honestly, I wanted to continue proving that at 19, yeah, I got my license, but I could do it all still on my own. And, you know, I had to learn the hard way. You know, obviously I was working at trying to get clients, but I didn't have the right, like, structure. I was just going out there, like, every day, like, door knocking, like, hey, you want to buy, you want to sell? Like, what you want to do? Help me out here. I'm new, I'm cute. Like, what's going on, you know? I was so way in over my head. And I also had bad mentors in the beginning. I just was looking at people I thought were successful, people that I wanted to mirror. And like I said, I just wasn't really prepared and prepared myself. And who could blame me at the time? At 19 years old, you don't have a lot of mentors. And that's why now, being 26, I have to tell you the mistakes that I made. I had to really struggle because I didn't get the proper help that I needed, and all I had to do was really go ask. But that's the thing, and when you're 19, you're not asking for help, you're just going and trying to figure things out. One thing I could say that year taught me, and it still resonates with me today, you know, I don't see any closed deals around me, but I'm still really energetic at the time. And I remember having that feeling after 10 months, there's no deals. I remember there was an agent in my office, and, you know, they only closed like 8 deals that year. And that's good, but they're over here clowning me for not closing anything. And I remember it was like my 10th month in real estate, I opened an escrow, and literally 3 days after, you know, the deal fell through. And I had this agent just like look at me, yeah, that's what happens. It's probably because you're too young, you're not experienced. You know, things like that can really like bring you down. And it brought me down because I'm like, shoot, I'm gonna cry in the car all the time. You know that Friday movie, I literally will cry in the car if you take my chain. You know, if you take my confidence away, you know, after my first deal going through, like, oh my God. It was really tough for me to just accept at the beginning that I was gonna have all these roadblocks. You know, mind you, the people who were giving me a chance in the beginning to even show them a property, they had to take the risk at me being 19 years old at the time. Like, do I really want this guy representing me? Do I want this woman at 20 years old representing me? And that's something that I had to learn as I got older. And that's why by year 2, I realized that I needed to step my game up. I needed to really be more knowledgeable about my market. I needed to also target how I was going to get get clients, because year one I wasn't structured. Like I said, I was just all over the place. I was working, I was trying to get deals, but girl, I was doing too much. So by year two, I literally was watching YouTube videos. That's how I got mentored. That's how I was getting educated on how to be a better agent. I was looking at guys like Max Maxwell, Brian Casella, these type of YouTubers, also agents who were successful, mentoring me for free game, like back in 2017, 2018. I was just learning free advice, how to prepare myself. By year two, I had the whole thing figured out based off of these YouTubers I was watching. They told me how to structure myself, and it's all about having a niche, having multiple niches and ways that you can target clients to build clients and to eventually close deals, right? And I figured out that I'm really personable, that I have a very nice face when I smile, and I have this charm, right? Maybe you don't think so, but I do. It's all good. And I knew from the very beginning that if I could do open houses, I would be able to meet clients that way very easily. That became a niche for me. Door knocking from the beginning was never successful for me, so by year two, I removed that door knocking niche that I had trying to get clients, because it did not work for me for a whole year. I gave it my best, but it didn't work. So now I have a new niche that I took away from the old one. I now am doing open houses. I don't do door knocking anymore, but that's not enough. I need another niche, social media. So my second year, I started putting myself out there more, and I was becoming more of a social media phenomenon where people in my local city at the time knew me. At the time, I was living in North County, and I would go to the grocery store at Escondido, and they'd be like, hey, I see your Facebook video, you're paying. Well, they didn't know I was paying at the time, but yeah, I seen this ad on my timeline, and yeah, I didn't know that you were an agent. Oh wow, good for you. And when can I go see your open house? Oh, okay, I'll go see you. I was getting that back then when Facebook was popping, because I took the chance and went out there and put myself on social media and started advertising when my open houses would be. And if you can tell, that's two niches in one. You do open houses, that's where you meet the clients, but to market that open house, you can go on social media and make a video and then present your open house just like here. Like, hi, my name is Antonio McNeil, welcome to my beautiful new listing here on, 123 Main Street in Palm Springs. It's a beautiful 3-bed, 2-bath property. Beautiful views of the mountains. You definitely have a close access to the 5 freeway, all that type of stuff. Come see me tomorrow from 4 to 5 p.m. I'll be here with snacks and drinks. You can literally make videos like that online, post them, and that's exactly what I did when I was 20 years old, my second year. I started building up not only clients, but building up momentum and a buzz in my local area, which essentially became a third niche for me, which is having referral business. So by my second year, I knew what I needed to do. Have niches to become successful in the long term in this business. And I'm telling you, without having niches my second year, I wouldn't have been able to build up my real estate career from year 2, year 3 to year 4, where I was already on my second property that I'm currently in right now. In this type of market, especially for my generation, it's tough for us to buy a house. Like, it gets tougher and tougher every year, it seems like. So for, you to be able to get even one house during this time, it's an accomplishment. So I just want to be able to do the same thing like I did. I want you to be able to get that experience. If you're Gen Z, if you're a millennial watching this, and even if you're an older generation, it's fine. It's possible. The whole reason why I'm even talking about, my first year and then my second year, and the biggest difference. From my first year, I made $0 in real estate. To my second year, I made $60,000 alone in real estate. I still had my part-time jobs my second year, and I made a separate $25,000 off my part-time job. At the time, I just worked at In-N-Out my second year, so $25,000 at In-N-Out for the whole year, and then I have $60,000 from real estate. I felt like I was on top of the world by year 2. It was a big difference from making 0 to $60K in one salary, or one income source, I should say. And another thing I learned from year 2, definitely want to be yourself. You want to stay true to who you are. Mind you, my first year in real estate, I was definitely energetic, but I was always afraid of not disappointing somebody or acting too wild or too energetic. And trust me, if you know me, you know I am animated. This is how I live. This is this is me, right? So my first year, I'm trying to keep it together. Like, nah, I can't do that. So by the second year, I was already, more comfortable with myself. You could see it in me as a realtor. I started dressing more like this. Before, my first year, I would still go to a showings wearing a regular white tee with some nice Nikes and the freshest Levi's you would see. That's not gonna cut it. Being a very young guy, I had to realize by my second year, it's not just being a good agent and being knowledgeable of the area. You gotta present yourself in a whole different way. And by my second year, I was at these open houses dressing in nice dress shoes. Even like the dress shirts and the dress pants I were getting, they were from secondhand stores. I had no money like that, but you have to fake it till you make it, and you have to present yourself in a way where, a $500,000 buyers want to work with you when they buy a house. Where you have $1 million seller who wants you to represent their listing. They're not going to want you to represent it if you're wearing Dickies or Levi's. 501's not here. You got to do that somewhere else. Growing up in a house that is predominantly, religious and, also Mexican, when you're half black and Mexican, on top of being gay, right? There's a lot that, I would say adversity I faced. I put the quotes up, but it's real. I went through a lot, and my second year I realized in real estate that I had a lot of trauma from my past, not accepting my real personality, accepting that I like men, big deal, okay. All those weird little things. And if you're watching this and you're not gay, that's fine, trust me. I'm gay, but I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm also a very successful entrepreneur in this Gen Z generation. So you can definitely get some knowledge from here. Don't walk away from me yet. It's okay. I'm not trying to get your number. But what I am trying to get to is, having all of these adversities and feeling like I wasn't good enough, that resonated my first year in real estate. So for me, it was perfect timing by my second year to realize, no, it's okay to be you. These people like when you're a little weird and you act a little funny at the show, and when you get excited that they want to write an offer on this home. That's the personality that they need to make them feel confident to buy a house. We're always so worried about what the person that we're trying to appease is thinking about, us, and like, oh, are we doing the right thing? More than half the time, or 90% of the time, I should say, if you have a client that's working with you, whether it's in real estate, retail, and you're doing some type of high-end job for them, if they want to work with you, they want to work with you, and they're working with you because they like your real personality. Everything felt more organic. I wasn't putting on a front, you know what I mean? And like I said, it was smooth sailing. I was able to get a nice car. I felt like I was just living the best life, and I still feel that way thinking back to when I was 20 years old. And like I said, my second year, it was a big difference for me. Year one, had I quit after making no money, man, where would I be right now? So moral of the story is, don't quit your first year, even if you only close 2 or 3. Girl, I didn't close a damn thing my first year, and look at me now, okay? 6 figures on average every year, and now I have multiple streams of income, so I don't have to even worry about hustling in real estate, because I just hustle in other streams of income. Something's gonna come in for me either way, and I want the same for you. I want you to have a stream of income sources, but if real estate is the first source that is going to funnel everything else, I got to help you get to step 1, and then step 2, step 3, step 4 later. And keeping it on real estate too, we're going to talk about that adaptability concept. And if you know what adaptable means being adaptable in any surrounding, any situation. So if it's a new situation, new location, new city that you have to put yourself into, let's say that you lost a job and there's a new job opportunity, 5 states across from you, and you have to leave back your family, your friends, to start a new life. You get a 6-figure job, are you gonna miss out on that opportunity? You got to be adaptable and be willing to take that step. And a lot of people, they don't even realize how adaptable they are. They think that they're not able to make a big change in their life because they are not used to it. But the more you become adaptable to surroundings, personalities, how people act with you in a transaction or in any situation, any business deal, the more adaptable you become, the more easy all this grind work seems. being adaptable allowed me my second year to understand the personality of clients, I should say. Because I used to think like if a client was upset that their offer didn't get accepted and they would have a bad reaction, that they were mad at me. Oh my God, I would always be like, what did I do? Like, oh, like it would make me feel like so bad for the whole day, but I was overthinking. And that is a key word. And it's something that I wish I could have avoided. Overthinking. I would overthink so much of why the client was upset that day. Did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? More than half the time, if not all the time, the clients are typically never mad at you. They're just upset, they're stressed out, they're nervous, they're crying, they're happy, they're angry, because it's one of the biggest financial investments that they're making when buying a home. Most of the time it is. Unless you are a millionaire, buying a home is one of the biggest financial investments. So it took me a while after my first year to realize, like, no, if something doesn't work out and you did everything you could, it's not on you. You shouldn't take on all that stress. If anything, you have to learn to process it, learn that today's today, tomorrow's tomorrow. We start brand new. And if that client is still with you and hasn't given you any indication that you did something wrong, then you're learning to be adaptable. Learn to understand the emotions of each client. Learn to be adaptable when you have to make a quick, sudden change from a different state. Being adaptable will help you become the best entrepreneur and the most successful entrepreneur you can be. I feel like when you're not adaptable, I see it in so many of my friends and even family members. They're not adaptable, so they feel like the world is just so hard to tackle. Being an entrepreneur is so hard to tackle because they don't know how to move themselves from comfort. And if they move away from comfortability for too long, they want to run back to the comfort. They don't want to be adaptable and stay in a new spot, because if they stay too long, they feel like the fear is going to start coming in and the failure is going to happen if they're in a new situation that they're not familiar with. Even for me, when I go back to my beginning years in real estate, being an agent, I mean, I had to be adaptable. Most of you, if you're becoming an entrepreneur at a very young age, we're all adaptable because we're so young. We don't even know like the next step. We could have mentors on YouTube. We could have, people giving us advice through music, through education videos, but you still have to go put in the work. So being so young, you have to learn to adapt to any surrounding, to a really nasty client who is $1 million client that's gonna set you up for the next year. You gotta get that $30,000 check. If they're an a-hole, you gotta deal with it, right? There's so many things that you gotta learn, especially if you're a young Gen Z entrepreneur, that your attitude, your ego, you have to let it go. And I wanna make it clear, like with my generation, I do feel like we have this sense of like, not entitlement, but sense of pride. And we should, meaning we don't take no crap from anybody else, especially when it comes to customer service. You're not gonna treat me bad if I'm doing good to you, right? You don't get to treat me like any way, but I'll tell you this, being 26 years old, being a very emotional guy, girl, you gotta let it go. Take all that ego, that pride, and throw it to the side, because I'm telling you, my first year of being so prideful of the customer service I was providing, it stopped me from making a bag. It stopped me from getting paid. I would get upset when a client would talk to me a certain way. Like when I'm writing an offer, my first year, I remember one time this client, Judy, oh my God, she was really testing me. She's like, how long does it take for you to write an offer out? Are you gonna send me the offer tonight? Because I've been waiting for an hour. And it's like, I'm a new agent and I'm learning the offer, and I'm like, if you don't shut the, but you know what I'm saying? Those little things, I didn't say that obviously, but my attitude showed that I was getting annoyed with the client. I missed out on that deal, and I still think to this day it's because of the attitude in me defending myself that prevented me from getting that deal. And I'm just like, I still think about it, because that would have been a check where I could have got out of a situation that was toxic for me when it comes to like a relationship I was in back then. So again, but because I thought at the time that I had to defend myself and I was being attacked, I let that $6,000 deal walk away from me. I made a $6,000 check later. My first check was $6,000, but I didn't get the first check until 6 months after the fact. So I lost out on some good money because of my ego taking the better of me. And if I'm being honest with you, sometimes I still go through that today, but I check myself before it becomes a problem. And that's the biggest thing, is if you can check your ego and your pride before a situation transpires, or in the process of it transpiring, if you can pull yourself back before you react to a situation, oh girl, boy, you're gonna live, you're gonna have a great life being an entrepreneur, because it's all about that self-discipline too, managing your own emotions when things go crazy with the client that you're dealing with in any type of business venture, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're a car salesman, you just gotta hold your composure at any situation, especially being Gen Z, being an amazing generation, having all this information that we do. We also have to admit that we have to swallow our pride and our ego to get ahead in life, and there ain't nothing wrong with it, because I ain't complaining no more. I'm just so happy that I'm even able to be talking right now, being in one of my second properties here. You don't even have to work super hard in real estate forever. Once you get the first 3-4 years of your real estate career and you stay consistent with putting in the work, by the time you're on year 5, year 6, year 7, like me, you get referral business, past clients referring you to new people. So half the battle's done once you put in the first couple of years of work. And again, taking that ego, putting it to the side, not having the ego when you have an opportunity that is presenting itself to you. And trust me, it's gonna happen sooner than you realize. So always be prepared to have that momentum, have that energy when you're talking to a client. Have information, be educated on the topic that you're doing. But again, be yourself. Hold yourself accountable when you have an ego trip, and just make sure that you are genuine and that you have a good heart, because everybody can read that, they can feel it, and everything else will work itself out. As long as you put in the work and the time and you structure yourself to find the ways to get clients to be successful, you will get there. It just takes time. Everything takes time. Moving over to something more real estate related, but a different topic for this podcast, we are going to talk about the market take. On this podcast, we are going to have a real estate take, we're going to have a market take, we're also going to have a culture take. More takes on little different subgenres that I would like to talk about on the podcast. But for this one, we're going to take it to the market and see where the current interest rates are at. So I'm looking on Bankrate right now. On Tuesday, November 15th, the current average interest rate is benchmark 30-year fixed, 7.32%. So the average 30-year fixed mortgage right now is 7.32%. That is crazy. That is a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm a real estate agent. I still think it's a great time to buy, but I do look at that price and I'm like, or that number, I'm just like, whoa, like that's insane. So one thing I will say, just reading this, I want to let people know who are watching or listening to this podcast that if you are in a situation where, let's say you have your first couple of years of success already as a real estate agent, an entrepreneur, you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and you're in a situation where you're about to buy a house, everybody's telling you don't do it, the rates are crazy, you want to wait for the rates to drop. Let me tell you something, don't wait, please don't. Find the right realtor who can help you negotiate the best deal in this type of market. Just because the rate is high, that doesn't mean you still can't buy a home and make it affordable for you and your family. In case you don't know this, if you get the right agent to negotiate a deal for you, you can have an agent, your buyer agent, represent you on a house where the seller of that same house is offering you money back, not towards your down payment, but to lower your interest rate. The common thing that you can do as a buyer, because I'm a buyer's agent, I love working with buyers. One common thing you can do to help yourself with paying out-of-pocket costs for a down payment is asking the seller for a closing cost credit, meaning the money that they receive from profit from the sale, some of that money, X amount of dollars, will go back to you as a buyer before the end of escrow. So the credit that the seller's giving you goes towards your down payment costs or your closing costs, which are your prepaid taxes for the property taxes, making sure that they can collect that money up front. But what if you don't have that money to pay when you want to buy a house, or you're struggling a little bit to pay for that? You don't have that money, but the seller does for you. And a lot of times buyers forget or they don't know. In a situation right here, rates are high, but you have an ability to buy right now, and you may not in a couple of months. You think you still have to wait because these rates are high. No, ask the seller or have your agent ask the seller and the seller agent to give you money back, to not lower your closing costs, but to possibly lower your interest rate. If you're in the process of buying right now and you have an agent, I'm sure you have your pre-approval, talk to your lender and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Lender, is there a way that I could reduce my current interest rate? Let's say your interest rate right now is 6.5%. Talk to your lender and be like, hey, I don't like this rate. So what can I do to lower the rate from the 6.5 to something lower? That's where your lender will most likely tell you that you have an option with your loan, depending on the loan you have, to ask up to 3% in concessions from the seller to give you back to go towards lowering your interest rate or to pay down your closing costs. And again, concessions means, the credit that the seller's providing. So if you can get that, let's say $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $9,000 in credit from the seller, imagine what that $8,000 to $10,000 can go towards. It goes towards lowering your rate. It's probably going to cost you at least $7,000 to $8,000 to lower your interest rate to a whole point. But you would be surprised, just that alone can save you hundreds of dollars on your monthly mortgage payment. And again, that's why it's like, why would you just walk away from the market because the rates look high? No. There's always a good opportunity to buy, especially when the buyers are all kind of being nervous. You as a buyer now have an opportunity to go in on a house that you like a lot, and let's say you can negotiate a lower price. You can ask for closing cost credits back to lower your rate, pay for some of your down payment costs. You can get like a 3-in-1 deal in this type of market with the interest rates going crazy. As long as you have the right agent and the right lender to inform you how to get money back from the seller to reduce your costs monthly, it's always a good time to buy. Come on, girl. I'm not telling you just to sell you. I don't even know you. Like, whoever's listening to this, you know what I'm telling you is true. Like, as long as you're well informed about how you can get money back from the seller, you can find a lot of ways to lower your current interest rate with your lender to make you feel way more comfortable to make that step in buying the house that you're looking at right now. Right now, I'm not in the process of buying my next property, but I will be soon. And I'll tell you what, in 6 months, if the rates are at 7-8% still, I know how I'm gonna negotiate my deal. I'm not gonna just find the one house that I'm really in love with. I'm gonna find a bunch of options and find the seller that's gonna give me the concessions, the credit back to lower my interest rate more, so I'm not paying top dollar on the next property that I decide to buy. These average rates ain't gonna stop me, and they're not gonna stop you if you're paying attention. So thank you for listening to all of that. Now, for the next take for this podcast, I wanna take it to the culture. We've talked about real estate, we talked about the market take, now I want to talk about the culture take. And for today's culture take, I want to talk about 2 rappers, one that's a legend in the game who has stapled himself as one of the GOATs, then you have one rapper who is a great rapper in his own right, but from my generation, a rapper I respect a lot. We're talking about Nasir Jones and 21 Savage, okay? And I know that you're probably thinking, well, which one are you calling a legend? If you're asking that, you should stop watching, because I know I'm 26 years old and I love music from the 90s, the 80s. My mom raised me on certain artists, one of those artists being Nas. And I remember being 6 years old when Godson, his album dropped. 21 Savage was on Clubhouse, essentially saying that an artist is not relevant if his core audience is not 30 years or below. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, and I don't believe that that's accurate, because being relevant doesn't mean just that. It doesn't mean that by definition you have to be 30 years or less to have relevant music. If your audience is not 30 years or less, you're not relevant. That's not a definition, that's not a term. I understand where 21 Savage is coming from, where he could say, maybe if he was saying this, I think he was, that Nas has a core base from the 90s where they're now in their mid to late 40s, early 40s, and their 50s almost, and they are not relevant because hip hop's a young sport. But let's even take that into context. Hip hop was a young sport. It's always going to be a young sport. But people like Nas are proof that in today's culture, in today's state of hip hop, that hip hop is not only a young culture, it's a middle in between culture, it's an old culture, it's everyone's culture. And I understand when 21 says, well, just because you have that core fan base, that doesn't make you relevant. Well, if you know Nas and you know his discography, you would know from the beginning, real quick, that he is more relevant than we realize. Because all you gotta do is just look at Nas's discography from Illmatic to now King's Disease 3. 15 studio albums. And that doesn't mean that you're relevant. I'm not there yet, but follow me. You have a guy who made his debut album in 1994. It's considered like the greatest hip hop album of all time, if not one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time. After that, he has these other albums that come out after. It Was Written, Nostradamus, all these other albums, and they're not meeting the same standard of Illmatic, based off what the media is saying, based off what the fans are saying at the time. You take this guy's career, he almost had his career diminished by one of the biggest rappers, Jay-Z, back in the early 2000s. What I'm trying to get at is Nas has seen so much backlash. He has had hip hop against him in a lot of moments, and he has proven every other 3 to 4 years he drops impactful albums where maybe they didn't resonate at first when they dropped, but they resonate way after or a couple years after. Illmatic to Stillmatic to God's Son. It Was Written is still a great album too, and people don't give it credit, right? But now let's talk about his later albums. Untitled album and the one before that, Hip Hop Is Dead. These albums are very relevant to hip hop. It's what's pushing hip hop to where it's currently at today. Take it to now. With the trilogy of King's Disease, you have King's Disease 1, 2, and now 3. And right in between there, you have another project called Magic. This project is a 9 out of 9. I mean, you hear the beats, you hear the production. This does not sound like production that is not relevant to today's sound. So to even say that he's not relevant because he sounds like an old artist, that's not even true. Nas literally brings what he brought back from the 90s, and now in this time in the 2020s is perfecting his old 90s sound and adding new ways to appease to an audience that he's never met, never known, because they're my audience. It's the Gen Z audience that he is now opening his music to. And maybe he's not targeting us specifically, but you can't say that King's Disease 1, 2, or 3 are not mentioned by 25-year-olds, 20-year-olds. A lot of these 20-year-olds, 15-year-olds even, their parents grew up on Nas, okay? A lot of these kids have parents that are bumping King's Disease right now. Those kids love hip hop. You think their parents aren't gonna school them on Nas? That alone makes Nas relevant. He'll never leave because his music continues to evolve with the times. He still also keeps elements of what made him one of the greatest rappers from the beginning, from the Illmatic days. He is showing you that he could continue this path for 20, 30, even 40 years almost. Like, that is something that should not be looked at as not relevant. Just because you're not selling over 100,000 your first week anymore, that shouldn't be the only reason or the main reason why you're relevant. Talking about the business side of Nas, I mean, Nas has so many business ventures that he has gotten into from the beginning, early 2010s, that have now made him hundreds of millions of dollars richer. Separate from music, he has been able to find a way out of music, so he doesn't even need to drop these classics he's dropping right now. He took a different route. He started getting into venture capitalism, financing himself, putting money with other business-like individuals, and they have a venture group, and they invest, $4 or $5 million back in 2012, 2013 in Lyft and Coinbase, all these companies back then, to now selling those stocks that they invested in years ago to now being worth hundreds of millions of dollars after selling those stocks and shares that they had in Lyft, Coinbase. Nas was one of those investors back then to invest his small $1 million money to make it big $100 million money just within 7 to 10 years. And you want to say that's not being relevant? But again, this is where 21 Savage proved himself wrong. He is relevant, Nas is, because Not only was he able to become a business entrepreneur, capitalist, whatever you want to call it, he was able to become a successful entrepreneur. And the money he made from hip hop, he invested it into businesses that made him hundreds of millions of dollars. To now he comes back years later dropping these classic albums, and I can guarantee you most likely he's making these albums now because he's inspired. He feels great. Life is really good this time. He's making all these streams of income sources now. He doesn't have to work as hard in real estate, or in hip hop I should say. He can relax if he wanted to, but he still decides, after making all these business moves, these smart money moves, making 20 million here, 20 million there, 100 million now here. Now he's like, well, I'm in a good space. I'm gonna come back and give hip hop what it needs. And let's just keep it 1,000. Without Nas, we wouldn't have the new age rappers that we have today. Without the core base of hip hop and what it is, we wouldn't even have the sounds be inspired to make hip hop what it is today. Just because, Nas is from New York doesn't mean he doesn't inspire somebody from San Diego, from Atlanta, from LA. That type of hip hop it should be cherished while we still have it. And that type of hip hop artist should be more cherished, because again, a lot of us 25 and older, 26, 27-year-olds, we grew up on some of these 90s artists. And a lot of those 90s artists from that era are not successful or able to live off of their own riches from hip hop or from investments outside of hip hop, because they weren't doing the moves that a person like Jay-Z, Nas, Diddy, Dr. Dre. You gotta follow these people and realize, okay, they may not be relevant on the surface, but they are relevant for the long-term benefit of their lives and for the culture. Because if you have more like-minded people like Nas, like Jay-Z, like Dre, like Diddy in hip-hop, and you have more of those people come into hip-hop and have that same mindset that these people have in their 40s and 50s, like Nas, like Jay-Z, we're gonna have more millionaires. We're gonna have more entrepreneurs making more than just hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're all gonna be millionaires if we all apply the same mindset that Nas has, not only to his businesses outside of rap, but to how he applies his rap now, staying relevant to the new sounds, not changing who he is to his core. He's now finding niches, essentially, kind of like real estate. He keeps his old niche, his old core base of fans, and now he has a new base of fans by going in the studio with Hit Boy, dropping classic after classic after classic. If Nas ain't relevant, I'll just say this. If Nas ain't relevant, I don't want to be relevant, okay? I want to be like Nas when it comes to making money moves at the same time. Longevity like no other. Rappers like 21 Savage have to be grateful that they're still here, because if anybody knows, rappers do not last usually more than 3 years. Drake is an exception. 21 Savage is an exception. Rappers like Migos and, Lil Baby, they're exceptions. But how many of these rappers are really gonna make it for another 5-10 years? Are you gonna all have relevancy like Nas, like Jay-Z, like Drake even, the one that everybody looks up to in this generation? I mean, look at Drake, Drake gets his money. He's not just out here talking about this person ain't relevant. I mean, maybe he does sometimes, but the bottom line is you gotta find ways to move the culture in more ways than just a music, a song, a beat. You gotta find way more ways to move the culture over rap. It has to be bigger than that, because if you're just concerned about being relevant in hip hop but not being relevant as an entrepreneur to educate the community, your own community, I mean, what are you really offering? Are you just offering more hip hop songs every year? Great tracks, great collabo albums, great. And let's just keep it 1,000. The collaboration album that he has right now with Her Loss, it's like a Drake album featuring 21 Savage. I'm not saying that you're not relevant, I'm just saying, will you have the same type of relevancy that Nas has, where he can be a businessman, he can make hundreds of millions of dollars outside of rap, and then come back into rap and drop classics and add value from the 90s and bring it into the 2020s and provide beautiful music and education on how to be a businessman, be a businesswoman. that relevancy should never go, and that relevancy should never be laughed at. That's the best type of relevancy that you'll ever have. And that's it for today's episode. Guys, thank you so much. Wherever you're at, listening, watching this video, I want to thank all of you. I promise you that this is just the beginning. As this podcast goes on and the episodes continue to happen, you're going to see I make it happen. It's going to be more impactful, more information will be coming your way as far as real estate, investing in real estate, understanding your own finances, and then going to the culture, understanding how culture impacts us with our day-to-day lives. We're gonna have so much fun as this podcast grows. But again, until next time, take care of yourself, go be amazing, and remember, you are the person that can make your life happen at any moment. Believe in yourself, love yourself, make it happen. Take care.